Next to this video, I've included a list of products you will need to dye your gi. My gi was starting to look a little bit grotty, so I decided to dye it to give it a fresher look. I recommend using an old gi, especially if it's your first time. That way if you mess up, it's not that big of a loss. One of the greatest parts about dyeing a gi is that the dye does not stick to the patches, so it gives it a really fresh and professional finish. Make sure to use a white gi and whiten it a little bit before you dye it to get rid of uneven colorations. You can use some white vinegar to do this, or order some pre-wash from Dharma Trading Company. That being said, you don't have to use Dharma. That's just what I used, and I found it really convenient. It's the only one I really know about. So make sure your top and bottom are both the same material and thickness, or else the dye will not come out the exact same color. That's what happened to me in this process. Partway through, I realized my water wasn't hot enough anymore. If this happens to you, just microwave it. You'll need small amounts of water to mix with the dye and with the fixative. You don't want to try mixing it in cool water. The first step is to fill your bucket 3/4 full with hot water. I don't recommend standing there and spraying like I did. I ended up changing methods partway through. Then you'll need 8 pounds of salt. That ended up being 8 of these containers. Each of them were less than 50 cents a piece, so it was less than $4 in the end. Pour all of the salt directly into the hot tub of water. The tablespoon and a half of oil is optional. Supposedly it reduces the surface tension of the water and gives you a more even dye. Once you put the gi in the tub, it does tend to float to the top, so maybe it really does reduce the dye lines. In a separate bowl of warm water, take 3 cups of water and 3 tablespoons of urea, 1 tablespoon per cup, and mix it into the solution. Depending on how much dye you have to use, darker colors use more dye, you'll need to use more water and more urea. Make sure to mix it up completely, and you can even pour it through a sieve or an old washcloth in order to get all the little speckles out, because it will turn your gi speckled if there are still hard pieces of dye that touch your gi. I was dyeing my gi a dark color, so I used 2 2-ounce cups of dye for the entire thing. If you're dyeing in a light color, you might be able to get away with just 1. Once you have the urea in there, just pour the dye in. The urea is only there to help it mix with the water. Really, if you use too much water or too much urea, it doesn't matter. You have so much water in the tub anyway, and it's such an inexact amount, just 3/4 full, that it's not going to ruin anything, as long as you have 1 tablespoon of urea per 1 cup of water. In fact, more water than you need is better than too little, because if you don't have enough, your solution will become too saturated and all the dye won't mix in correctly. Once your gi is in the solution, you need to stir it and turn it over about every minute. It's important to do this because you want to make sure that there are no folds in the gi preventing the dye from getting to any part of it, and that the certain parts of the gi aren't poking out of the water too much. You also don't want the gi to rest on the bottom of the tub for too long, because if any of the dye collects on the bottom of the tub, that dye will speckle the bottom. I learned that the hard way. Do this for 20 minutes or until you feel your gi is dark enough. Remember, it will lighten after you wash it. While you're stirring the gi, you'll want to be preparing some soda ash, also called fixative, to stop the dyeing process once you're ready. Ingredients call for 2 cups of soda ash, also known as fixative, to stop the dyeing process of a gi in a tub about this size. Unfortunately, the small amount that you order from Dharma is only 1.5 cups. You can order larger amounts, but I think this one sufficed. It seemed to work for me. I had a rough time getting the soda ash to dissolve. The recipe only called for 2 cups of warm water, but I ended up needing a whole lot more. Use about 6 cups of warm water with 2 cups or 1.5 cup of soda ash. Don't pour it directly into the hot water really quickly, or else it can harden and become red hot, preventing you from even being able to put your spoon through the solution because it's so hard. Make sure to hold the gi at the opposite end from where you're pouring, because if you pour it directly on it, you'll end up with some dark splotches. Also, pour it in really slowly. The instructions said a 15-minute period just to pour the water in, or just to pour the solution in. I didn't take that long, but I did pour it really slowly. After you put the fixative in, keep stirring it for about half an hour. Now you're ready to put it in the washer. I ended up washing mine twice in a row just to make sure. Don't worry, the dye will not stay in the washer. Also, when you bring it to the washing machine, make sure to put it in a trash bag or something so it doesn't drip all over your house. I had to use 2 trash bags. So there you have it, how to use Fiber Reactive D to dye a gi in a tub. If you're thinking about doing it, just go for it. It only takes about $30–40 to get all your supplies together. And then the urea will last you forever, as well as the oil that breaks the surface tension of the water. You can also get a couple other, like a pre-wash and a post-wash, to soften the gi because the dyeing process makes the gi a little bit hard. That'll also last you a little while. So all you need to use for subsequent dyes is more dye, and you might need to order more soda ash depending on how much you ordered the first time. If you're in the Dallas or Fort Worth area, make sure to check out Star Jiu-Jitsu and Peak Performance Jiu-Jitsu. This has been James, and I hope this video was helpful.